Economic history often looks like pure chaos. If you track the timeline of global production, you see a relentless series of erratic spikes and violent crashes, booms driven by industry, busts driven by panic. Take the dataset for World Gross Domestic Product from 1870 to 2007. Mapped out visually, it appears as a jagged time series line that climbs exponentially over a century and a half, dominated by short-term noise. This noise fuels an ongoing historical debate. For decades, economists have argued over whether long-wave economic cycles, like a repeating 50-year pattern known as the Kondratiev wave, actually exist in this data. Skeptics argue that seeing cycles in global GDP is a case of pareidolia, which is the psychological tendency to find meaningful patterns in completely random noise. This animation shows a way to resolve that debate. We stop treating global GDP as a historical timeline and start processing it as a complex mathematical waveform. Using spectral analysis, a mathematical tool that breaks down complex data signals into their underlying frequencies, we can translate the jagged time series data into a clean spectral density graph. By transforming the data into the frequency domain, the random historical noise flattens out. What remains are specific, isolated frequencies hidden within the global economy that pulse continuously beneath the surface. Shifting out of the time domain moves cycle theory away from subjective historical narrative and roots it strictly in objective, verifiable mathematical proof. Here is the spectral density graph for the 1870 to 2007 period. Looking at the far left side, we can isolate the baseline finding of the data, a single, dominant, low-frequency peak. This peak confirms the presence of the Kondratiev wave. The math shows a highly regular period of exactly 52 to 53 years. Furthermore, this cycle holds a statistical significance in the range of 4 to 5%, proving it is a distinct, measurable phenomenon. Moving across the spectrum to the right, we encounter the higher frequency peaks, which represent shorter-term volatility within the global system. The first of these is the juggler cycle. Operating with a period of 7 to 9 years, this wave is typically associated with shifts in capital investment. The spectral data assigns it a robust statistical significance of 2 to 3%. Next to it sits the kitchen cycle. This is a rapid 3 to 4 year rhythm, driven largely by business inventory dynamics, and it registers with the exact same 2 to 3% significance. The spectral analysis provides hard empirical backing for a multi-tiered rhythm to global economic output. The economy operates on a stacked hierarchy of strict, recurring mathematical frequencies. For decades, macroeconomics has also relied on a concept called the Kuznets sling. This is a proposed 15 to 25-year cycle, historically attributed to long-term demographic shifts or major infrastructure buildouts. However, the spectral data reveals a problem with this theory. The analysis shows absolutely no evidence of an independent 15 to 25-year cycle driving the economy. To understand the missing Kuznets signal, we have to look at the physical concept of wave harmonics. Harmonics are secondary frequencies that occur as strict integer multiples of a base frequency. This animation shows the fundamental 52-year Kondratiev wave, rendered as a clean, continuous sine wave. If we overlay a secondary, higher frequency wave representing the third harmonic, it intersects the primary 52-year wave exactly 3 times per period. When combined, they create an interference pattern. The resulting composite wave perfectly matches the historical timing and amplitude that economists previously misattributed to the Kuznets swing. The Kuznets swing is a structural byproduct. It is a mathematical artifact of the 52-year Kondratiev wave, not a standalone driver of global macroeconomics. This raises a critical question regarding historical continuity. Has this unified mathematical rhythm always governed production, or is it a strictly modern phenomenon? We can test this by applying the exact same spectral methodology to the pre-1870 world GDP dataset to check for the presence of the 52-year Kondratiev signal. This split-screen graphic compares the two eras. On the right is the post-1870 data. On the left is the pre-1870 data. Prior to 1870, the Kondratiev wave completely disappears from the global aggregate, flatlining into pure statistical noise. But if we isolate the pre-1870 GDP dynamics specifically for the Western core, separating it from the global aggregate, A faint but distinct Kondratiev peak emerges. The 52-year cycle existed strictly in the West, yet it was completely undetectable at the global scale during the exact same period. This confirms a core principle of world systems theory, which posits that the globe is divided into an economic core and a less integrated periphery. Before the late 19th century, the global economy was fractured. The system was simply not integrated enough to move in unison. The year 1870 represents the quantitative boundary when the Western core's economic rhythm acquired enough mechanical strength to synchronize and dictate the macro dynamics of the entire world. Applying this framework to modern history requires examining the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. The severity and systemic shock of the 2008 event forces us to ask how such a massive localized collapse fits into the strict predictability of the long-wave model. This chart maps the time series K-wave model out to its extreme right edge. The exact drop of the 2008 crisis plots as a steep, definitive downward point at the tail end of the data. The spectral analysis offers two distinct topological interpretations for this point. Path 1 is the optimistic topology. In this model, the 2008 drop is a temporary depression situated between two localized peaks during the broader upswing phase of the fifth Kondratiev wave. Path 2 is the pessimistic topology. Here, the 2008 crisis marks the definitive peak of the expansion. It represents the start of the fifth K-wave's long-term structural downswing. While spectral analysis proves the long-term wave structure exists, it also demonstrates that at critical junction points, the short-term macroeconomic trajectory remains highly bifurcated. By treating historical GDP as a waveform, we strip away the subjective narrative noise of economic history and expose a highly ordered, hidden architecture of global production. This architecture operates on precise, statistically significant harmonic frequencies. The 52-year Kondratiev wave, the 8-year juggler cycle, and the 3-year kitchen cycle stack together to govern global output. We also see that this unified system is a specific feature of the modern era, fully synchronizing globally only after 1870. Understanding these deep mathematical rhythms provides objective clarity. Relying on spectral analysis over historical intuition is essential for anyone trying to navigate the invisible macro boundaries that govern global growth today.